Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family, and this is fun for me. I just love doing this stuff.
This is fun indeed, definitely. And we want to say a huge thank you to our newest Patreon, Crystal.
We find these statues all over the world. We find them in Mesopotamia, in other words, that Fertile Crescent area that we were talking about, all the way from Iraq over to Levant, where we have modern Israel, up towards Turkey. And we find these statues over in Latin America, so far apart, and yet, very, very similar. Oh, just making dollies for the kids, or are they representing things they have seen in the past, in the ancient past, things that have walked amongst us? And in fact, this is why you have that biblical prohibition about thou shalt make no graven images of anything in the earth, in the sky, or in the sea. Absolutely. Cover all tracks and traces of guys like this. We talked about this statue before. This is a real statue of a real what? Ancient god. Yeah. And again, this is down in South America. Well, he certainly looks scaly. He certainly looks humanoid. He's got some big old toes there. And apparently seemed very, very real to certain people. Conversely, this statue was found in Japan. And it looks to depict a very, very reptilian-looking entity that is humanoid and wearing clothes. And this is an ancient statue from Japan. What the heck is going on in this world? Oh, and, before we get into this, I just wanted to bring up again Phil Schneider, who talked about deep underground military bases, specifically a lot of talk about Dulce and New Mexico. And I've been in this area, and I've been camping there, had weird experience camping, felt that there were things that were very, very dark in that area. And he died mysteriously. He didn't die pleasantly, and he spoke out so much about the government working underground with extraterrestrials, with greys, and again, the reptilian beings that David Icke and so many others have spoken of. And again, death under mysterious circumstances. And then this whole video started because of this one little earthquake. 2.2, nothing of note, 6 kilometers south-southwest of Lugoff, South Carolina, little town of Elgin. I know this area very well because this was my home. This is exactly where I lived for numerous years after leaving the Northeast. And so, I specifically drove down these roads. My house was within a mile of where this earthquake is. And it's only 2.4 kilometers deep. That's not deep, guys. So, this is, from what we gather, this is really a deep underground military base expansion, which, hey, it's right next to Fort Jackson. Fort Jackson, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Yeah, Fort Jackson, of a lot of fame and history. Fort Jackson, which is adjacent to Columbia, South Carolina, 53,000-acre U.S. Army Training Center. Named for President Andrew Jackson, South Carolina native, it was originally established way back in 1917 when it trained men of the 30th and 81st Infantry Divisions between 1925 and 1940. It served as an encampment and training area for the South Carolina National Guard. Then it became a permanent Army garrison in 1940, lost its former name of Camp Jackson. After World War II, Fort Jackson became a replacement training center. During the Korean War, the 8th and 31st Infantry Divisions trained here. In 1973, Fort Jackson was appointed as a U.S. Army training center, and since 1995, Fort Jackson is home to new training facilities and schools, including the U.S. Army Soldier Support Institute, the DoD Chaplain Center and School, Defense Academy for Credibility Assessment. Today, Fort Jackson is the biggest and most active initial entry training center in the entire U.S. Army, training half of all soldiers and 60% of all women entering the Army each year. And I lived very close to this, and coincidentally, this is where my dad went into training for World War II. So interesting little history there. Again, this is the number one base that people go through when they enter the Army. Now, it was set up in an area of just rough woods and nothingness. At least that's what the history says. As this base was set up again during WW1 and was utilized during World War II to a high degree. The interesting thing about this is, as I was making this video, I saw some of the headlines just from yesterday. 2 Army drill sergeants found dead in 8 days at Fort Jackson in South Carolina. Fort Jackson base officials say that Staff Sergeant Zachary L. Melton Jr., 30, who was found dead in his car Saturday after not reporting for work. Melton was stationed in Fort Jackson with 1st Battalion, 34th Infantry Regiment. First responders were called to the scene, and he was pronounced dead after they arrived. Melton had been with the Army for over a decade and was a drill sergeant for the last 3 years. Okay, so this is a drill sergeant. He's, that, what was that, officer and a gentleman? Are you a steer or queer, boy? That type of thing. Yeah, he was a drill sergeant. So this is where he was just going through training recruits. So he wasn't somebody that was probably unfamiliar with the area. Is probably there for a while, as we're saying, and he's not the only one, is the curious thing. No cause or manner of death have been announced as of this point. As we see, 2 Army drill sergeants from Alabama, both from Alabama, found dead in 8 days. 8 days before Melton was found, Staff Sergeant Alan Bertram was found dead after not showing up for work. So this is another sergeant, been with the Army for 12 years. And he was a drill sergeant at Fort Jackson for the last 18 months. That is curious, is it not? Wonder what's going on there. I mean, we could think about a lot of people are leaving the planet very suddenly. It could be something related to that, maybe depression, maybe drugs, maybe alcohol. I don't know. Maybe they had the same girlfriend. Who knows? But that is curious.
It is very curious, and like the ad said, or the article said, there was no obvious reasons for death. I mean, there's just nothing there. So I don't know. It sounds suspicious. So they go in, they find a perfectly healthy young guy just laying on the floor who suddenly stopped breathing, not just 1, but 2 in the same area. Weird.
And having lived in that area, I do remember hearing of deaths there often, or relatively often. It wasn't like it was, something that never happened. And you would think so, because if half of the Army people that go into training are going there, you're going to have accidents, you're going to have things like that. But it's the mysterious ones where they don't release the cause of death that brings up little question marks. So here we see an article from September 14th, 2020. So this is over 3 years ago. And we see a basic combat training soldier found dead in his barracks. 29-year-old recruit from Wisconsin was found on Saturday morning. Exact cause of death is under investigation, not related to the plague upon the land or any sort of training exercise. And the reality is, 3 other soldiers had died on the base in the past year. So it's a trend. And you have a private 19-year-old Army National Guard soldier from Minnesota found unresponsive on a field, later died. 29-year-old Army National Guardsman from Connecticut died after suffering a medical emergency during a non-strenuous activity. Now, that was before a lot of thickening of things, if you know what I mean. And September 21st, 2019, 18-year-old soldier from North Carolina died experiencing a medical emergency while he was preparing to do physical activity training in his battalion area. In fact, I think this is just something that regularly happens. Now, these could be just nothing, but the point I want to make is that when you get around energies, dark energies are like jumping into water that's infested with sharks and you have a cut. They just sniff it, and they will take advantage of things, and they will utilize pain and suffering for their own food and fuel. And these dark energies are around military bases. And then we jump over to the very interesting case of the Lizard Man of Bishopsville, South Carolina. There were a series of sightings, over a dozen sightings in a relatively brief time span. And then individual sightings after that, not as many, but it started back in '88. And so this is something that goes on for a long time. There's been many little shows put up on YouTube and on TV about the Lizard Man of Bishopsville, with little reenactments done, trying to, make it look kind of cartoonish. There's actually a festival that they have, the Lizard Man Festival, you see here in Bishopsville. It all started with a young man that had a flat tire, driving home from work at 2 a.m., changing the flat tire out in the middle of nowhere next to a swamp, and he saw something coming towards him with glowing red eyes. And he jumped in the car and was closing the door when it grabbed the door. He got the door shut and sped off, and he could see that it was right behind him, as you see this depiction. And I remember this being plastered all over the papers. I do remember this. I mean, I've always been down the cryptid road, always been curious about anything like that. And it was big news. Wanted, the Lizard Man. It left impressions, which you could see today in a local cotton museum here, the South Carolina Cotton Museum. And the impressions are over a foot long. They're three-toed. Now, we've seen that on our own property when we had property out in Nevada desert across from the base, Nellis Air Force Base, which includes Area 51, Area 6, and many other off-limit areas where you will get shot if you get too close. Have you seen the Lizard Man, the Lizard Man? So, the thing about the earthquakes is we've seen times when there's a rash of earthquakes there, and they're always very shallow. And when we look into it and Cindy remote views it, she sees that what's going on there is they're blasting out tunnels and they're enlarging the underground military base.
Right. I mean, I've heard a lot of talk about, they're destroying tunnels, but no, I mean, they're just kind of sort of in constant making them bigger, making them better, expansion. That's what I keep seeing.
As we see this article from June 2018, 30 years later, the legend of the Lizard Man lives on in Bishopsville. It certainly does. And again, many people had encounters with this, whatever it is, and many people are taking advantage of it, trying to commercialize it and, sell books, sell posters, sell T-shirts, memorabilia. Of course, that is the nature of this system. And of course, Lee County is the county where most of the sightings took place. They're going to do what they can do because it's not a rich area by any means. Oh, wait a minute. No, that guy was the guy from the Black Lagoon. That's not the Lizard Man. But I got links here for you guys if you want to look at it. But it all goes back to June 29th, 1988. Local teenage boy was driving home from his job when he blew a tire just outside of Skateboard Swamp. He got out of the car, noticed a figure emerging from the swamp. What he saw was 7 to 8 feet tall, soaking wet, scaly green skin. Red eyes, 3 sharp fingers on each hand. And he said, too, that it smashed the car with that 3-fingered hand. And it is interesting because, I've had a direct encounter with a gray that had 3 really long fingers. And, again, we've gotten impressions on our own soil of 3 long toes. And so this terrified 17-year-old hopped back into his car and tried to drive away. The creature caught up quickly. At first, the creature hopped onto the back of the car, but then it crawled to the front, looked down at the boy through the front windshield, snapped the front fender of the car in half like somebody might snap a toothpick, tore into the sides of the car, ripped off the radio antenna. Finally, he was able to shake the creature off by quickly driving forward, then reversing, and he was able to drive away to safety. Unfortunately for him is that he, and this is what makes it even more curious, could be just totally coincidental, but he lost his life and was murdered. And it was like 20 years later, he was murdered, and they said it was drug related. And you have emergency officials, I guess, joking about a lizardman eclipse connection. This was in 2017 when we're talking about the big eclipse coming. And yeah, again, they're just trying to crack jokes, but are they telling you something? As you see this map showing the eclipse, and this was the first of the 3 eclipses. And there were actually articles referencing this in regards to the lizard man connection. That is, to me, just kind of strange. It's just, I guess maybe it's just human nature. This is a historical map in response to recent media reports about possible paranormal activity associated with the upcoming total eclipse. South Carolina EMD does not know if lizardmen become more active during a solar eclipse. We advise the residents of Lee and Sumter counties to remain vigilant. Yeah, tongue in cheek. Well, as we said, Christopher Davis, who said that he saw the lizard man, was killed. He was murdered. Then 2 people were ultimately arrested. Lakeem Devar Butler is still in jail at the corrections facility over in Columbia, South Carolina, and he was murdered. So this is the young man that saw the lizard man. Now, if it was just him with no physical evidence, it'd be one thing, but there were numerous cars that had damage, and there were over a dozen people that came forward speaking about encounters at the same time period. And as we said, a second person, Anagori Santrell Slater of Rembert, turned himself in as well in the shooting death of Christopher Davis, who died at 37. So obviously a very, very tumultuous life. And this is from the Post and Courier, which is a local paper down in Charleston, if I believe. The area is dense. It's densely wooded. There are swamps. It's, again, this is an area in which I lived for years. And that is, as you can see here, these are some local articles. There was just a complete uproar about this. And all the people that were just spotting this thing, all in unison too, three finger hands, red eyes, 7 to 8 foot tall, etc., very, very aggressive. As you can see, the paper, Reagan was president back in those days. And in here too, it has other encounters with other people. I'll give you guys the link so you can see them. This right here is damage to one lady's car that is, I think, still in permanent display of damage that the lizard man did. As this is a real quiet area. I mean, this is just out in the country. Quiet area, not really an area with a lot of excitement per se. But she had 7 cats that disappeared in that time period when they saw the damage to the car. Now, the officials were saying they probably thought it was maybe a rabid dog that ate the cats and attacked the car. Okay, yeah.
Boy, that's just easy. Sweep that right under the rug. So this one caught my attention. So I decided to feel into it a little bit and just try to figure out what is this thing, because there's a lot of stories, but there's also a lot of just, dead ends off a cliff where they leave you with nothing. It's like this mysterious thing happened, but what is it that really happened? Now, when I felt into this entity, this energy, it does feel alive. It also feels very angry. It has a high degree of self-awareness, but a very low degree of controlling itself. Through the anger, whatever they use to create this thing, that is taking over its psyche. So it tends to act more on its instincts than anything else. I'm also picking up that this thing has the ability to change frequencies, which can make humans feel very, very uncomfortable. Has me wondering about those two drill sergeants and other people that were just, found kind of gone with nothing wrong with them. So it's a little murky there with the energy, but I wouldn't be surprised if this thing couldn't put off such a frequency that might cause a heart issue or aneurysm.
Well, and just another subject that was coming up recently was the jinn. Yeah. And what exactly are the jinn? The jinn are very numerous. They are very numerous. They are shapeshifters. Somebody was doing a video, I think it was Billy Carson, because one of you guys linked something to a show that was talking about some of the stuff he was talking about, and asking, are the jinn reptilians? Are reptilians the jinn? They work together. They are separate. They are different beings, although both can shapeshift. In fact, outside of the body, when we shed this body, we can shapeshift. I mean, we can appear as an orb. We can appear in a humanoid shape. If we wanted to, we could change that as well, because things are just more pliable when you're outside of the physical body. And so, this is all part of stuff that's understood by the elites and the secret societies and those that are trained in this area through other methods. So when you're around these dark energies, things like the jinn are always demanding blood sacrifice. That's just the nature of the game. And now we're learning about just how dark, how extremely dark the true control system on the planet is. And they're always getting the jinn to do their bidding by offering them food. It's just like training, a wild animal, so to speak, feeding it. They'll tell you, don't feed the gators, don't feed the gators, because you don't know if that gator is going to all of a sudden just eat you, because it knows to come onto your property from like a pond or something and expects to be fed. It'll eat your dog, it'll eat your cats, and if it can't eat those, it'll eat you. Well, I mean, that's the same way that these jinn are. They're of the same sort of frequency as that. And yeah, they can be manipulated, and the elites do utilize them. And at the same time, well, why would they work for the elites? Well, because the elites feed them. And in fact, when we talk about war is one big banquet. It's one big blood sacrifice. They dress people up in their soldier outfits and send them off to die, and they are sacrifices. That's our modern day equivalent of rituals that went on in the ancient days and still go on in dark corners. So the point that I'm trying to get across is the fact that, it's not necessarily Lizard Man that's killing these soldiers, but the dark system. Yeah, it just brings death, tragedy, and disaster anywhere it goes.
Mm-hmm. Right, and if the military knows about one thing, they definitely know about frequency. So upon making some type of entity, I wouldn't be surprised if that's not something they threw in there, its ability to change frequency. Now, the thing that I kept really picking up on was its inability to control its actions, but it's self-aware. So unfortunately, something that's somewhat zombified, that if it acts on instincts, like, I mean, we need to breathe, we need to eat. These are just instincts that are just, we have to do it to live. And this thing is, its instincts are so incredibly strong. It's self-aware, but it doesn't have the ability to control itself, and that makes it very angry and very cranky. So this was a curious entity to explore.
And that's exactly what they want with humans.
Yeah,
that's
they want with us.
they want us. They want to utilize our self-awareness and our God spark that's in us, but they want to be able to control us like zombified puppets.
Yeah.
And so that makes this experiment makes so much sense.
It does. And what we have noticed lately is people really having a very, very difficult time. People not feeling well, and I do believe that on some level they are putting out frequencies to make people exhausted, to make them tired, to make them angry. And of course, there is a way to record all of this information via social media, because people hop on there and they write down how they feel, which is normal. And the AI comes and gathers all of this data. It compares it to the frequencies that they have set out there for us, and on goes the experimentation on humans. Now, if we're not aware that we're being guinea pigs, we're just going to be oblivious to it. We're just going to act on it. But if we are aware and we do know, then that at least gives us the ability to resist and to do something to change our own frequency, because we have that ability. We have that ability to go into deep meditation, to do mantras, to do prayer, whatever you want to call it. But we have the ability to fight back with those energetic frequencies that they keep pushing off on us.
Absolutely. So, I'll look more into the history of that local area, because, it's fascinating, as we shared before, when you look to over around Ridgecrest and, that area that had that huge quake, you see that a military base is built exactly on top of an area that was said to have inner earth ties, and in fact had artifacts inside it that appeared to be just like in the case of the Grand Canyon, which is kind of straight across on a parallel, Egyptian and Asian, like Tibetan artifacts in the same cave, and giant bodies. And yet you can't go in there because there's a military base built straight over the top of it. Yeah. Again, all these legends have roots in truth. And when we're talking about inner earth beings and Nagas, which was a separate topic, again, there's reality here, and the Nagas are not the same as the Draco, and so there is a different connection there. But yeah, our reality is far weirder, but it'll all make sense soon, as these pieces are coming out really rapidly now, and I think a lot of people are putting the jigsaw puzzle together.
Indeed.
As always, guys, much love. Thank you for your support on Patreon and also on Ko-Fi. Couldn't do it without you. Look forward to your comments, and also give us suggestions on other topics, other rabbit holes to go on down. There's so many.
I know, this was fun. Source bless and namaste.
Namaste.